"Mama, I can't get pregnant for him. He is too poor to take care of me and my baby. He doesn't deserve a child with his broke self." Those harsh words echoed through the small apartment as Chioma, tired and frustrated, lashed out making a phone call. That evening, she stormed into the house after work, her face filled with anger. She found Obinna sitting quietly at the dining table, eating the food she had prepared. Without warning, she walked up to him and poured the entire plate of food over his head. "Useless man! You can't hustle like other men to provide for your family. All you do is sit here and eat my money. I will frustrate you until you regret marrying me," Chioma shouted, locking the kitchen door. Obinna sat in silence, tears streaming down his face as he thought about his life, his failures, and the struggles that had consumed their marriage. After their wedding, Obinna had to move from Abuja to Lagos to stay with Chioma. Before their marriage, they had been in a long-distance relationship. Chioma, who owned a successful spa in Lagos, had promised to move to Abuja after the wedding to set up a branch of her spa. Meanwhile, Obinna was involved in importing and exporting agricultural goods and was financially comfortable. However, things took a turn just before their wedding. Obinna made a bad investment, losing a large sum of money to scammers. Devastated and in debt, he considered canceling the wedding, feeling unworthy of Chioma. But she assured him they could face the challenges together. They went ahead with the wedding, though Obinna was filled with guilt, knowing some of the investors he owed were even present at the ceremony. After the wedding, he moved into Chioma's two-bedroom apartment in Lagos, hoping to rebuild his life. The first few days of their marriage were blissful. They enjoyed their time together, and Chioma even reached out to her influential friends, hoping to find Obinna a job. However, days turned into weeks, and weeks into months, with no success. Obinna struggled to find employment, and Chioma began to feel the weight of being the sole provider. After 3 years, the situation had not improved. Chioma paid all the bills, handled the rent, and took care of food expenses. Her patience began to wear thin. Her friends advised her that Obinna was using her. They told her he was lazy and would never take responsibility. Slowly, Chioma's attitude toward her husband changed. She started to resent him for his inability to contribute financially. Chioma, now frustrated beyond measure, gave Obinna an ultimatum. If she was to continue paying the bills, he would have to work in her spa without pay. Obinna had no choice but to agree. He began his new role cleaning the house, cooking meals, and bringing food to Chioma at work. Despite his efforts, Chioma found fault in everything he did. If he arrived late with her food, she would scold him. When he asked for money to take care of personal needs, she would make excuses and delay giving him anything until he looked unkempt. Obinna's parents urged him to return to Delta, but he refused, hoping things would improve. To outsiders, Chioma appeared to be a loving wife, but behind closed doors, she treated Obinna like a servant. One day, while working at the spa, Obinna made a small mistake in front of customers. In a fit of anger, Chioma slapped him in front of everyone. Humiliated, Obinna left early, unable to bear the embarrassment. That evening, Chioma returned home and continued berating him, calling him lazy and impotent. She even accused him of being a burden and told him they would start splitting the bills since he couldn't provide. This was the final straw for Obinna. He began to grow distant, sleeping on the couch and avoiding Chioma. He realized he could no longer rely on her for support and decided to find a job on his own. Obinna's search for employment continued with little success. One day, he stopped at a local food vendor to buy a small meal. He looked tired and defeated. The food vendor, a kind woman, noticed his distress and started a conversation with him. Over time, they became friends, and she offered him support. She promised to help him find a job by talking to some of her influential customers. Obinna agreed and pretended to be her brother when she introduced him to potential employers. Thanks to her connections, Obinna finally secured a job. Grateful for her help, he would often visit her food stand, and their bond grew stronger. With his new job, Obinna started contributing to the household by paying for utilities like electricity and water. He no longer depended on Chioma, who began to grow jealous of the time he spent away from home. Her friends continued to fuel her suspicions, claiming that Obinna might be cheating on her. Despite their growing distance, Obinna focused on his new life. He spent most of his time talking with the food vendor, who was a single mother, raising a beautiful daughter. He found comfort in their conversations and felt valued for the first time in years. One morning, Chioma's friend sent her a picture of Obinna coming out of an office building. She was shocked to learn that her husband had been working without telling her. Enraged, she confronted him the next day, accusing him of hiding his job and lying about his whereabouts. Obinna tried to avoid her accusations, knowing that his wife's jealousy was beginning to take a toll on their marriage. Chioma, now filled with insecurity, demanded that Obinna start paying the rent. With the help of his salary and the support of the food vendor, Obinna was able to meet her demands. However, Chioma continued to question his loyalty, suspecting that he was having an affair with another woman. Chioma's jealousy grew stronger with each passing day. Her friends continued to plant seeds of doubt in her mind, telling her that Obinna might be cheating on her. They encouraged her to continue being strict with him, warning her that men would take advantage of her kindness if she showed any weakness. Meanwhile, Obinna's career was flourishing. He had been promoted at work and was given a new apartment and a company car. When Chioma saw the changes in her husband's life, she felt a pang of regret. She realized that Obinna was recovering from his financial struggles, and she began to question her treatment of him. Chioma couldn't shake the guilt she felt for treating Obinna so poorly. She tried to apologize to him, begging for forgiveness and asking him to stay. However, Obinna remained silent. He had endured years of mistreatment, and Chioma's apologies came too late. In a moment of vulnerability, Obinna broke down in tears, telling her how much her cruelty had hurt him. He revealed that he knew about her contraceptive pills and how she had been avoiding pregnancy because she didn't believe he was worthy of being a father. He had overheard her conversation with her mother, where she said, "Mama, I can't get pregnant for him. He is too poor to take care of me and my baby. He doesn't deserve a child with his broke self." And also, he knew the house they lived in was actually hers and that he had been paying rent to her without knowing. He also mentioned that he found the house documents while looking for his own missing papers. She started crying, blaming the devil, and claimed she loved him. Chioma's tears couldn't change the damage that had already been done. Obinna packed his things and moved into his new apartment. After Obinna left, Chioma was overwhelmed with regret. She had never imagined that her actions would push him away for good. The house felt emptier than ever, and she found it difficult to sleep without him by her side. Her friends, who had once cheered her on, were now distant, sensing the destruction they had caused in her marriage. Days turned into weeks, and Chioma tried reaching out to Obinna, but he didn't respond. In her heart, she knew she had lost him, not because of his struggles, but because of her own impatience and cruelty. The guilt gnawed at her, especially when she realized how deeply she had hurt someone who had always been faithful to her. Rumors started to spread about Obinna's new life. He had been promoted at work and had even moved into a beautiful new apartment. The news shocked Chioma. She had underestimated his determination, believing that he would always be the man struggling beneath her shadow. Now, it seemed that he was doing better than ever, without her. What stung the most was the news of his relationship with the food vendor, a single mother who had been kind to Obinna during his lowest moments. Chioma's insecurities flared up again, but this time they were mixed with envy and sorrow. She could see that Obinna had found happiness with another woman, someone who had valued him when she could not. Consumed by regret and loneliness, Chioma sent a desperate message to her mother and friends, hinting that she was considering ending her life. "I've lost everything. I don't know how to go on. I made a terrible mistake," she texted them. Her mother and friends rushed to her apartment, filled with concern. Chioma's mother, Mama Nene, was furious when she realized how deeply her daughter had been influenced by her friend's poor advice. She scolded Chioma for allowing them to interfere in her marriage and reminded her of the value of humility and patience. But Chioma wasn't the only one to blame. Her friends, too, felt the weight of guilt. They had advised her out of jealousy and bitterness, some of them carrying their own failed marriages and projecting their unhappiness onto Chioma. Now, they stood there, witnessing the aftermath of their meddling. Determined to make things right, Chioma, her mother, and her friends began searching for Obinna. After weeks of asking around and following him, they finally tracked him down to his new apartment. Chioma's heart raced as they knocked on the door, unsure of what to expect. When the door opened, they were greeted by a pregnant woman. She was the food vendor, smiling warmly as she held her growing belly. Chioma's heart sank. Her worst fears had come true. Obinna had moved on, and the woman who had been there for him was now carrying his child. Obinna appeared behind the food vendor, his expression hardening when he saw Chioma and her entourage. "What are you doing here?" he asked coldly. For the sake of Mama, he invited them inside, though he made it clear that he wasn't interested in rekindling anything with Chioma. "Mama, I have moved on," Obinna said firmly. "Tell your daughter to move on too. This is my wife now, the woman who valued me when I was at my lowest. She may be older than me, but she's carrying the child that your daughter refused to give me. Chioma took contraceptives to avoid having my child, but now I will have a family with someone who respects and loves me." Chioma stood frozen, her heart pounding in her chest. But before she could respond, something unexpected happened. She ran outside, covering her mouth, and vomited. Everyone stared in shock. Mama rushed to Chioma's side, alarmed. "Are you okay?" she asked. But Chioma simply nodded weakly, unable to speak. Chioma stepped forward, her face pale as she stammered. Chioma lowered her gaze, her voice barely a whisper. "I'm pregnant for you." Obinna's shock quickly turned to anger. "How can you be pregnant, Chioma? You starved me of intimacy for years. We were never together. Don't you dare lie to me," he shouted, his voice filled with hurt. Mama turned to her daughter, her face flushed with embarrassment and disappointment. "Who is responsible for this pregnancy?" she demanded. Chioma fell to her knees, sobbing uncontrollably, knowing the truth has caught up with her. "It's Chief, one of my biggest customers at the spa. He's the one who opened the spa for me, bought the car and the house, though Chief is married and his family lives abroad." Everyone stood in stunned silence. The truth was finally out. Chioma tried to explain herself, but nothing she said could undo the damage. She had betrayed her husband, a man who had remained faithful even when he had nothing. To make matters worse, when she called Chief to inform him of the pregnancy, he denied responsibility. He called her names and accused her of sleeping with other men. Humiliated and heartbroken, Chioma watched as her world crumbled around her. Rumors spread about her infidelity, and soon her reputation was tarnished. She could no longer maintain the lifestyle she had worked so hard for. Chief had cut ties with her, and she was forced to close her spa, unable to pay the rent. While Chioma's life fell apart, Obinna's new life blossomed. His relationship with the food vendor deepened, and soon after, they welcomed triplets into the world. The joy of being a father and having a loving partner gave him the strength he needed to move forward. For Obinna, this was a time of healing. He reflected on the years of suffering he had endured and realized that his patience had paid off. He had found happiness in the most unexpected place, a small food vendor who had treated him with kindness when the world had turned its back on him. With nowhere left to turn, Chioma was forced to sell everything she owned and return to her village. Her dreams of a luxurious lifestyle in Lagos had been shattered. As she sat on the porch of her mother's house, she reflected on her mistakes, wondering how things had gone so wrong. Chioma's mother, though angry with her daughter, still loved her and helped her start over. But life in the village was far from the glamorous world Chioma had once known. She had to face the consequences of her actions, and though it was difficult, she knew she had no one to blame but herself. This story teaches that pride and impatience can destroy relationships, while humility and perseverance build stronger bonds. It highlights the importance of valuing people during their struggles rather than abandoning them for temporary gain.